Living at my parents' home while working remotely, I found comfort in the familiar rhythms of daily life. At 27, I am single, and my immediate family consists of my parents and my older brother, who married last year. For a long time, I believed that my brother and his wife, Ellie, were wrapped in the glow of newlywed bliss. Lately, however, Ellie has been visiting us more frequently. While this house is her in-laws' home, she carries herself with such ease that it initially surprised me. From the moment I met Ellie, I couldn't help but admire her striking beauty and effortless confidence. Qualities that, in contrast, often make me feel a little self-conscious. Despite this, she has always treated me with warmth, as though I were her own sister. She speaks with an openness that invites trust, and I find our conversations refreshingly candid. One afternoon, as we sat together, she turned to me with a curious expression and asked, "Sophia, I heard you're single. Why haven't you found someone yet? Do you feel uncomfortable around men?" I shook my head. "Not at all," I assured her. "It's just that my job as a web designer keeps me mostly online. My social interactions are limited, and I don't often have the chance to meet new people. I barely have time for social events, let alone dating." Ellie listened intently, her brows slightly furrowed in thought. Then, with a sisterly concern, she said, "You have so much to offer, but it sounds like you're not giving yourself enough opportunities to be seen." She offered to give me tips on makeup and fashion, gently suggesting that a few changes could help enhance my appeal. Her kindness touched me. It wasn't just about appearances. Her eagerness to help felt like genuine encouragement for me to step outside my comfort zone. "Sophia, first you need to adopt some basic elements that naturally draw people in," she advised. Her words made me reflect on my daily habits. At home, I tend to keep things simple. My hair wrapped in a bandana to help me focus, minimal makeup, and comfortable loungewear. Of course, for formal events like my brother's wedding or family gatherings, I take the time to dress elegantly and apply my makeup with care. Perhaps Ellie's impression of my style was shaped by only seeing me in my most relaxed state. Her comments stirred something within me. It wasn't just about attracting a romantic partner. It was about embracing more opportunities to express myself outside the confines of my home workspace. At that moment, Ellie's enthusiasm bubbled over. "Let's see what you've got in your closet," she declared, rising from her seat before I could respond. With a bright-eyed curiosity, she strode into my room and began rummaging through my wardrobe. I hesitated, unsure whether to stop her, but seeing her genuine interest, I decided to simply observe. My wardrobe isn't overflowing, but I'm particular about what I buy. I make sure each piece reflects my personal style. As she sifted through my neatly arranged clothing, her eyes widened with surprise. "Wow, you have really nice clothes," she exclaimed, running her fingers over the fabrics. Then, turning to my carefully curated makeup collection, she added, "And your makeup is top-notch, too. I always thought stuff from this brand was too pricey for me." She continued exploring my belongings with an almost childlike fascination, admiring each item with an appreciative eye. After nearly an hour, I started to feel that her curiosity had perhaps gone a little too far. "Ellie, maybe that's enough," I said gently. She looked up, her expression sheepish. "Oh, I got so carried away," she admitted with a small laugh. As she stepped back, she concluded with a thoughtful smile. "You don't need to buy anything new. You already have everything you need." Ellie's sharp eyes scanned the room as she continued her impromptu wardrobe inspection. "You even have all your winter clothes sorted," she observed, though her tone carried mild surprise at the scattered piles left in her wake. I noticed the mess but chose not to comment, feeling a twinge of disappointment that she hadn't thought to tidy up after her exploration. "No, I choose my makeup carefully," I explained when she turned her attention back to my beauty products. "My skin is sensitive, so I've tested many brands to find what works best for me." She tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her expression. "But you have such high-quality makeup. Don't you use it often?" "Honestly, I only wear makeup on special occasions. It's not something I feel the need to put on every day," I replied. Ellie didn't seem entirely satisfied with my answer, but her enthusiasm quickly returned. "That won't do. Next time I visit, I'll show you some makeup techniques," she declared with a knowing smile before continuing her exploration. As evening settled in, it was time for her to leave. Yet, as I watched her gather her things, a question lingered in my mind. Why was she visiting so often? Was everything truly well between her and my brother? My parents, on the other hand, welcomed her presence with open arms, treating her as if she had always been part of the family. Isn't it nice for Christy to have a big sister? My parents mused later that night, clearly pleased by Ellie's involvement in my life. We're looking forward to seeing her teach you those makeup techniques, they added with genuine warmth. Yet, there was an underlying note of caution in their words. But it's important that Christy doesn't rely too much on Ellie, they reminded me. I nodded, sharing their sentiment. Ellie's spontaneous nature led her to take on various impromptu projects, this makeup lesson being the latest example. My parents saw these gestures as acts of kindness, but for me, they often felt like intrusions into my personal space. While I appreciated her good intentions, I preferred focusing on my remote work, undisturbed. Addressing this unease with my parents was difficult, especially since they were so accepting of her presence. With these thoughts swirling in my mind, I returned to my room to restore order. As I folded and put away my winter clothes, the ones Ellie had left strewn about, I suddenly realized that something was missing. My favorite sweater, a cherished item I had purchased just last year, was nowhere to be found. I prided myself on maintaining an organized wardrobe, regularly donating clothes I no longer needed, and keeping track of each item. I knew for certain that the sweater had been in my closet earlier that day, just before Ellie had entered my room. A memory surfaced. While she was there, I had briefly stepped out to ask my parents to prepare some tea and snacks for her. When I returned, she had brought her bag inside. Could it be possible that she had unintentionally taken my sweater? The thought unsettled me, but accusing her without concrete proof seemed unfair and unlikely to be believed by others. Frustrated but resigned, I decided there was little I could do about it now. However, I resolved to be more prepared for her future visits. Determined to prevent a repeat of this situation, I discreetly invested in a small security device, setting it up a month in advance. Sure enough, Ellie returned exactly a month later, her usual enthusiasm in full force. Bursting with excitement, she announced her plan for our long-awaited makeup tutorial. Without hesitation, she made herself at home in my bedroom, rifling through my closet once more before selecting a bag filled with my most treasured makeup tools. "Come on, sit here," she instructed cheerfully, patting the carpeted floor. I obliged, allowing her to take control as she meticulously applied various products, layering colors and techniques as if I were a blank canvas awaiting transformation. When she finally stepped back to admire her work, I glanced at my reflection in the mirror. The artistry was impressive, but I had no particular plans to go out that day. "Thanks, Ellie," I said, standing up. "I'll be right back. I just need to use the washroom." As I excused myself, I could hear her moving around the room, gathering her things. Moments later, she called out that she was getting ready to leave. From the bathroom, I raised my voice slightly, inviting her to stay a little longer and enjoy. I set out tea and snacks in the living room, hoping Ellie would take a moment to enjoy them before heading home. But I waited until she had truly left before turning to my computer, anticipation mixing with unease. Months ago, I had taken precautions, installing a discreet hidden camera in my bedroom, a quiet safeguard against any further unexplained disappearances of my belongings. With a deep breath, I opened the footage, my fingers hovering over the play button. As the video played, my worst suspicions were confirmed. Ellie, under the assumption that I wouldn't quickly notice a few missing items, had discreetly taken several of my makeup products, slipping them into her bag when she thought no one was watching. A pang of disbelief and disappointment settled in my chest. Sighing, I transferred the video to my phone for safekeeping, ensuring I had irrefutable proof should I ever need it. Then, I made my way to the living room to confront the situation. Coincidentally, my brother was there, his expression unreadable as he approached me. "Christy, it's been a while since you had a makeup lesson from Ellie," he remarked, his tone laced with something I couldn't quite place. "You shouldn't rely on her so much. It just encourages her frequent visits." I stared at him, momentarily caught off guard. Was he under the impression that I had been the one to request Ellie's so-called lessons? "You're mistaken," I said firmly, my voice unwavering. "I never asked Ellie for help. I never even invited her over." But before I could process my anger over Ellie's theft, my frustration only deepened as my brother's accusations took an even more bewildering turn. He crossed his arms, his gaze sharp. "What are you even saying?" he challenged, his voice edged with irritation. "Do you know that even our mutual friend has been worried about you? They said you're a mess, falling apart." I blinked, taken aback by the harshness of his words. I stood still, trying to make sense of the accusations being hurled at me. My brother pressed on, undeterred. Mom and Dad told me they're concerned too. You're always glued to your computer, barely stepping outside. And yet, he gestured vaguely toward my room. You somehow have a closet full of expensive clothes and high-end makeup. If you're not working, where is all this money coming from? Are you just siphoning off our parents? His words hit me like a slap. I clenched my fists, swallowing down my indignation. I work from home, I stated evenly, trying to keep my anger in check. I earn my own money. But he scoffed, shaking his head. Working from home. That's just an excuse for people who've dropped out of society. It's no different from being a NET. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to remain composed. It was infuriating, his complete dismissal of my career, his assumption that my remote work was somehow lesser simply because I didn't leave the house every day. The irony of it all was that, while he ridiculed my lifestyle, I had been the one quietly paying the property taxes on this house for years. A fact, it seemed, that had never been mentioned to him. When our parents arrived home, I wasted no time in voicing my concerns, hoping they would help de-escalate the situation. But instead of supporting me, they hesitated, glancing at each other in silent contemplation. Finally, my father spoke. If John wants to stay here, I see no reason to refuse. My mother nodded in agreement. It might be nice to have everyone together. Maybe Ellie can teach you more makeup techniques, Christy. I felt an icy wave of realization wash over me. I had been here all along, supporting them in ways they hadn't even acknowledged, and yet, with John now married and the prospect of grandchildren on the horizon, it seemed their priorities had shifted. Perhaps in their eyes, I was the less valuable child, the one with a quiet, solitary life, rather than the son who would build a family of his own. Still, I refused to let myself be defeated. If they had already made their choice, then so had I. Fine, I said, my voice steady. But I'll be taking my furniture and appliances with me. The room fell silent. John and Ellie exchanged stunned glances before my brother turned to me, his brows furrowed. How did you even afford all this? You should ask Mom and Dad, I said simply. Everything we got after you moved out? It was bought by me. Without waiting for a response, I left the room and began making calls. From the corner of my eye, I saw my brother turn toward our parents, demanding answers. I overheard my mother laughing lightly. If Christy's a NET, then since you earn more, John, we can just buy new furniture, right? Dad chimed in. Maybe we can finally get that massage chair we wanted. Despite their nonchalant attitude, it was clear my brother was reeling from the realization that I wasn't as dependent as he had assumed. Meanwhile, I focused on my preparations, securing the final details for my move. By the next day, my friends arrived, ready to help. The movers, led by a close friend who happened to own the company, swiftly and systematically cleared the house of my belongings. John and Ellie stood off to the side, watching in disbelief as piece by piece, everything I had contributed to the home disappeared. As the last of my items were loaded onto the truck, I turned to my friends. Would you mind helping me set up my new place? I asked. One of them smiled. Of course. You mentioned creating a new workspace for your writing. I promised to help, remember? It was then that Ellie, who had been strangely quiet, finally spoke. Her voice was uncharacteristically subdued. I'm actually a copywriter, she admitted hesitantly. And this gentleman is my copy editor. I arched a brow, waiting for her to continue. I've wanted to move out of my parents' home for so long, she confessed. People constantly barged into my room, taking my clothes and makeup. I kept delaying my move because of the financial burden of this house, because I was covering the property taxes. And then, you and John decided to live here. There was something almost wistful in her voice, but I wasn't swayed. That's funny, I said lightly. Because this house? It's under my name. Ellie's eyes widened. I pulled out my phone, playing the video of her quietly slipping my belongings into her bag. Color drained from her face as my brother and parents turned to her in shock. DR, it's not what it looks like, John started, desperate to salvage the situation. But the evidence was undeniable. The damage was done. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving them to their own unraveling. Months later, during a book signing, Ellie appeared before me, her frame thinner, her face weary. She returned the stolen clothes and nail polish, her voice heavy with regret. I'm sorry, she admitted. I need help. I gazed at her, unmoved. I can't associate with someone like you, I said simply, leaving the items untouched as I walked away. Through mutual acquaintances, I later heard how things had unfolded after my departure. My parents, John and Ellie, had moved in together, but the cycle of lavish spending continued. Eventually, John could no longer afford to support them, and tensions grew. My parents, once so indulgent, turned their frustration on him. Ellie, exhausted from working tirelessly to keep up, had no time left for herself, let alone for the family she and John had once envisioned. Meanwhile, I thrived. In my new space, away from the dysfunction of my past, I devoted myself fully to my work. My writing flourished. And most importantly, I found peace.